Welcome. Today's topic is on Amazon laws. As you know, my name is Roman Basie. I'm an attorney and CPA, and I practice in the area of tax planning and tax preparation and business succession planning as well. When we look at what we call the Amazon laws, what we're going to be looking at today is the different sales tax laws across the country and how they're applying to Amazon as an online retailer and how they're going to apply to all online retailers in the future. As you'll see, the states are varying with their treatment of Amazon across the country. And I'm sure you as tax return preparers are starting to see the effects in some of the tax returns that you're helping assist with. Now, while I know we're here to talk about the federal tax return preparation, this has such a significant impact, we felt that it was an important topic to bring to you today. So let's take a look now. I'm on slide 2. And again, here's as an introduction, we're all familiar somewhat with the sales tax laws across the country. We know we have state sales tax laws, and we know that we have local sales tax laws. And sales taxes are collected at the point of sale on goods that we purchase. And this is extremely important. These are what we call trust fund taxes, and you hear that terminology when you're helping your clients across the country maybe do their payroll taxes or do their excise taxes. And we'll talk about those taxes in other presentations and other updates in the program. But when we talk about what's a trust fund tax, it's a tax that's collected at the point of sale or the point of the wage being given. And the employer has to hold that tax in trust and then submit it to the state or federal government. They're so important because as an attorney and as a CPA, and I represent a lot of companies across the country, it is one of the top problems that I see in small businesses all over when they fail to remit the trust fund tax. So it becomes extremely important that we understand the Amazon tax laws and how they apply to sales taxes if you have clients that are doing business across the country. And don't we all? I have so many clients these days that come in and they say, well, Roman, I'm in Connecticut, but I'm selling goods on a regular basis to Florida. What are my legal ramifications? What are my tax ramifications? Do I have to be registered in that state? Do I have to pay sales tax in that state? So let's take a look at today's analysis, and then hopefully that will help you apply it to your analysis as you help with tax returns. I'll give you an example, too, of how important that these trust fund taxes are. So I have a client recently that owns a tanning salon, and they failed to pay in their excise tax, the 720 excise tax. They failed to charge their clients the excise tax. They failed to submit it to the federal government. It was a 100% penalty applied to them. So when they failed to submit the tax, they not only had about a $40,000 tax bill, they had an additional $40,000 to $50,000 in penalties and interest. I also had a company out in New Jersey, a pressure washing company, come to me and say, Roman, I didn't realize I had to withhold taxes on my employees and pay them over to the federal government. We all know that as 941 trust fund taxes. So again, we're seeing how important these things can be and how the shareholders of the companies that you're helping prepare tax returns for can be held personally liable for these type of taxes if they're not submitted. And as you'll see in today's presentation, how Amazon got behind the 8 ball with a lot of these taxes, then eventually had to settle up, make a decision, and move forward from there. And you'll see that as we talk about the different states. So as we talk about sales taxes, look at some of the examples that we have. Of course, purchasing of fast food, purchasing of groceries. And keep in mind, sales tax rates differ, don't they? Sometimes we have a different rate on groceries that we have on cars, that we may have on fast food. Some of those local rates and state rates can vary. Purchasing of consumer goods. This is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Walmart, Cabela's. Now, those are, for the most part, physical addresses. But sometimes they won't be that way. And look, the state tax is usually between 3% of the purchase all the way up to 9.5% of the purchase. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit of the background on the sales tax laws and how they apply to Amazon. So it used to be very easy, as most sales taxes back in the day were at the point of sale. Your customer walked into a hardware store, they bought a hammer, they paid $1 of sales tax on the hammer, that dollar was withheld by the cash register employee, and then that dollar is submitted to the state. It's not that way. Then it started to change. Catalogs came out. We had Quill. We now have Cabela's. What about, we used to have Sears catalog. We used to have JCPenney catalogs. Then all of a sudden, the sales taxes were not being collected at the point of sale. What was happening? We were ordering goods from catalogs. We were paying the bill at some point in time, maybe 30 days later. Maybe it was put on layaway and it was paid in sections. So the employer was collecting the tax over time and then having to submit it to the state. So we started to see some of the delay in the sales tax collection. And then in 1992, we had a court case come about, Quill versus North Dakota. And this is really where it started to hit, where the state of North Dakota tried to force the sales tax on Quill, being what we call now an online retailer. And the court came in and said, look, Quill had no physical presence in North Dakota at the time. They had no sales force in North Dakota at the time. But what they did have, and what North Dakota was trying to pin on Quill, was that they had a computer software that their customers in North Dakota were using. And what was funny is that the computer software consisted of floppy disks, and those floppy disks were located in North Dakota. And that's why the case came about, because North Dakota came in and said, well, you don't have a physical presence here, you don't have a sales force here, but you have this software that's located in our state, and you have these old school floppy disks that are here. Maybe some of you today listening don't even know what a floppy disk is. But the presence of those disks in the state of Florida, or state of North Dakota, triggered the state to try to tax Quill. But the Supreme Court struck that down, and they said you have to have a physical nexus to the state in which you're being taxed in order to be taxed in that state. But the court said something very important. In Quill versus North Dakota, the court said, Congress can overrule us. We will allow Congress to write a law that overrules this decision. So even though we're requiring a physical nexus, we will allow it to be overridden. So what happened next? Gosh, the internet became popular. Think about the early 90s and how it transgressed to the late 90s and what happened to the internet. And then, of course, Amazon was established, July 5th, 1994. So we started to see this progression. We've got taxes at the point of sale. Now we've got catalogs that came out. Now we have Quill and the North Dakota decision. Then we had Amazon, and Amazon changed the game as it relates to this topic. Little background on Amazon. I'm on slide 4. Of course, formed by Jeff Bezos, the CEO and founder of Amazon. Amazon began back in 1904 as a bookseller, and to this day, a very prominent online bookseller, as we all know. Currently, the largest online retailer that we have, look at their market capitalization, $407.8 billion. Look at the size of Amazon in relationship to Walmart and McDonald's. This becomes important when we talk about the sales tax revenue that's generated by Amazon, and the sales tax revenue that was generated from 1994 until now. Here we sit in the year 2018 for the 2017 filing season, and look at the market capitalizations of where we're at now, and think about all the sales tax that may have been generated and not paid in, or is now being generated and was paid in. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at the background of the tax information itself. So first, we had the Internet Tax Freedom Act. It did not bar sales on taxes, but it did tax other things on the internet. And this was passed in 1998. It did not bar sales taxes, but it looked at things and said, okay, there's going to be other things on the internet that we're going to allow, such as bit, bandwidth, email. To this day, those are not taxed. Now, what we've seen is the providers do different things with those, maybe offering higher speeds at better prices, getting around a sort of a taxation issue. But to this day, we still have bit, bandwidth, and email that are not taxed. The act was made permanent, actually on February 24th of 2016 under the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act. So if anyone's interested in taking a look at where did we get to with sales tax on the internet and what can we tax, take a look at the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act. But what it did is it said states are at a liberty to tax internet sales. They can do what they want as it relates to sales on the internet. Hence, look, the Amazon laws. And they have survived these laws that you're going to see today, these different treatments by the different states, have survived the Supreme Court scrutiny. Okay, so let's take a look now as we start to begin our state analysis. And when I go through these states, if you're helping your clients prepare tax returns in different states, kind of take a look at what states you're preparing tax returns in, and you can start to keyhole each one of your clients into those states. Several states have not passed a version of this tax, as you'll see. Currently, Amazon collects from 41 states. Now, it wasn't that way even this year. Even in 2017, 2018, we still have some states that are just now becoming effective, a part of this 41. And the 41 that we're going to talk about, and the District of Columbia, but we have Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana is one as well, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, of course, that's the one that we started with, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Now, New Mexico, they just started April 1st of 2017, they started collecting tax in that state. So if I read off a state where you're helping prepare tax returns for, be aware if you're dealing with a company that is selling online or you're dealing with a small business that is selling online, there are certain thresholds in those states, as you'll see today. There are certain tax rates that they've applied to Amazon. The question will be whether your clients need to be filing their sales taxes as well in those states, whether they need to be charging their clients those taxes as well, and whether or not the thresholds apply to them as well. And be careful, because the different tax rates apply to Amazon because of how large they are. They may or may not apply to your client. And if your client is an Amazon affiliate, you'll see that word being used a lot today, then you have to say, okay, am I being treated differently because my client that I'm preparing this tax return for is an Amazon affiliate? And what is the agreement that state has with Amazon as it relates to this? And this is important because if Amazon must collect sales taxes, there is a possibility on whether other state transactions are subject to the state sales tax. Now look at this. We're on slide 7. Amazon does not collect for Hawaii, Idaho, and Maine, and there are no state sales taxes in Alaska, Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oregon. And following is the analysis now of the rules specific to Amazon and its other retailers. So let's take a look, and let's start here on slide 8, and I'm going to start with Alabama. So online buyers, as of November 1st, 2016, online buyers started paying state sales tax in Alabama as Amazon agreed to participate in Alabama's simplified use tax remittance program. So if you're working with a client in the state of Alabama, they have a tax program. You need to take a look at that particular tax program. The measure allowed eligible online retailers to pay a flat 8% tax, as opposed to keeping up with the variances among the state and local taxes. The simplified rate is allowed to retailers that sell services or items in the state but do not have a physical presence there. The law also allows them to lock in the 8% rate even if the federal government adopts a higher figure in the future. Alabama, we started alphabetically, but I love starting here because look what they did. First of all, they made an 8% flat rate. How many of our states have a flat sales tax? Hardly any of them. Most of them have different rates depending upon the different good that's being purchased. So already, and we're going to see this because other states did this prior to November 1st of 16. There are also some other requirements listed under that Alabama statute, and I listed 2 of them there, that they have to have had $250,000 in sales or more, and that requirement is listed under the statute and under the program in Alabama. So again, I can't stress it enough as we go through this. Look at the state, look at what the law is, look at what they've done with the Amazon law, and then apply that to your client. Take a look at Arizona. And I mentioned earlier how much in sales tax revenue was lost since 1994. Look at Arizona. On October 26th of 2012, Amazon reached an agreement with the Arizona Department of Revenue to pay $53 million to settle unpaid taxes. Now, you tell me, did they lose more than $53 million since 1994? Absolutely. So it ended up being a very small settlement in my mind for Arizona. Furthermore, Amazon agreed in 2013 to begin collecting sales taxes for goods sold to Amazon. And they agreed to collect the 6.6% tax rate and not collect the local tax rate. So now what you're going to start to see is some states, as we saw in Alabama, they passed a flat 8%. Now we see in Arizona it was 6.6%. So you've got to know if you're helping prepare tax returns across the country or for clients in states where you're in or other states, what's the rate they applied to the online retailer and does it apply to your client? Here they're not collecting a local sales tax. You're going to see that through most of the states where they don't collect the local ones. And how much are the local governments losing now? And are we going to see local governments come in and start asking for sales tax to be withheld and collected on online transactions? You can bet you will start seeing that in the future. Section 425159 of Arizona's sales tax statute lays out in detail many of these exemptions for others other than Amazon. So if you're in Arizona and you want to see what the exemptions may be, take a look at that statute. Arkansas. The point I wanted to make here was that in 2011, they started requiring Amazon to collect sales taxes, and there is a threshold in Arkansas of sales over $10,000. Now look, most of our clients, if they're running a small business, they're going to have sales over $10,000. We've given this program for many years now, and I get phone calls and emails throughout the year from many of you, and most of those are usually related to the preparation of a tax return as it relates to a business that your client may have. Maybe a little home-based business, maybe a physical business. But that's why we wanted to help present things like this to show you the different thresholds that the states have as well. California is an interesting one because California in 2009, of course, we had Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor. And if California tried to enforce the state sales tax on Amazon, and what Amazon did was they threatened to terminate 10,000 of their affiliates in California if the pending legislature that had been proposed during Schwarzenegger's time was passed. Now, Amazon has what we call they had what we call affiliates all across the country. Many of them. And look, in California alone, back then they had 10,000. That number significantly grew as the years went by. In some states, they've terminated those affiliations. In other states, they've not because they've been able to settle. But in 2011, they threatened to terminate their affiliates, withhold commissions, and then they ended up doing it. And by the time they did it, they had 25,000 affiliates in the state of California that they cut off. But they ended up compromising. And what they did in the state of California was agree to a delay of 1 year before requiring online retailers to begin collecting sales tax on sales to California addresses. In return for the 1 year delay, Amazon created 10,000 full-time jobs, 25,000 seasonal jobs, invested $500 million in facilities over the next 4 years, and began remitting sales taxes on orders shipped to California. California began collecting the sales tax on September 15th, 2012, and the rate depended upon where the buyer was located. The caveat we have here is that that particular requirement may not apply to third-party sellers on Amazon. It's a little unclear still to this day whether that applies. But look, you've got a client selling to a customer in California with a California address. You've got to take a look at the California analysis and say, do I have to remit state sales tax because they have an address located in California? And remember, with Amazon, they're collecting the specific rate, state and local. You may have to be able to determine for your client what was that local tax rate. Gets really complicated, doesn't it? I mean, I hate, as I went through the presentation, even in preparing the materials, I couldn't believe the complications that we are creating with this whole set of laws, but they're out there. Colorado, they did the same thing. Look, in 2010, they terminated their affiliations. But again, they settled with the state of Colorado. They began collecting sales tax on February 1st, 2016. And there is a website that we've given you to go to take a look at the Colorado sales tax exceptions. So take a look at that one as well. In Connecticut, there's a threshold. As you see, it's $2,000 for out-of-state retailers in the state of Connecticut. In May of 2011, Connecticut passed legislation that required online retailers to collect the sales tax if they have a Connecticut-based affiliate. The legislation should have raised about $9.5 million per year for the state of Connecticut. Amazon agreed to collect state sales tax in the state of Connecticut at a rate of 6.35%. Connecticut does not have a local sales tax rate. So if you've got a client in that area, there's only a state rate there. And they also, and Amazon on a lot of these, which our clients will not be doing this, but Amazon had agreed in that state to invest $50 million. There was always this give and take on the back taxes owed and the investment that would be made in the state. In the District of Columbia, they started in October of 2016. They started collecting 5.75% of the sales tax. Florida. There's a big statute in the state of Florida, and it really hinged on, it began with the chain borders is where the Florida statute really began. And effectively, Florida came in and said, look, Amazon, by not paying taxes, they're able to save 6%. And they are approximately a 6% better retailer than our stores on the ground in the state of Florida. So you have to take a look at the state of Florida as well to see what they are looking at doing as it relates to the Amazon laws and the statute that is in play at this time. Let's take a look now. I'm on slide 11, and we're still going through the states now as it relates to the Amazon laws in each state. And take a look at Georgia. Georgia passed a law that became effective January 1st, 2012, expanding the definition of what constituted a physical presence in the state in the hopes that it forces online retailers to begin collecting online taxes. Physical presence is the kicker, and that's the kicker from the Quill case. So once your client has a physical presence in a state, usually that's a location with a storefront. But look, the states are starting to change that definition of physical presence as we see box stores across the country closing up and going online.